we have William Daniels, who's Mr. Feeny, and we have Bonnie Bartlett, we have Ryder Strong, and we have Will Friedle. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
For coming.
This place is huge.
There we go.
Whoops, careful.
You good? So, how are you guys doing today, first off?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
You happy to be here in front of all of these fans of Boy Meets World?
Huge. Oh my God.
Right?
It's so bright.
So we are all huge fans of the series, and why do you think just now, today, that Boy Meets World is still such a favorite TV series for people discovering it now and who watched it when it originally aired? What do you think was the spark that really made that series resonate with so many people?
Wow.
Good question.
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about over the years because it kind of surprises us that it's lasted this long. I remember when the show ended in 2000, I went to college in New York, and I was, taking a break from acting, and I was sort of like, oh, now I can just go be a normal college student and keep my head down. And then the show started airing on Disney Channel, and I would get on the subway at like 2:30 in the afternoon when all the schools in New York would get out, and the kids would just be like, ah! And I was like, oh my God, it's like more popular now than when we were on the air, which was really weird. And it has maintained a presence. I think, my theory is that, I give a lot of credit to Bill. I think that the character of Mr. Feeny is, and I think the idea that the show was important, that it took itself seriously. It was always a funny show, and it had a lot of ridiculous, crazy things in it, mostly done by this guy. It was absurd, but then it had so much heart, and it took things seriously, like the Corey Topanga relationship, the Shawn and Angela relationship, and Mr. Feeny always sort of saying like, hey, this is, be a good person, dream, try, do good. Those messages. It made for a kind of a schizophrenic show. Like it's really funny at times, and then it's really dramatic. And I think at the time that made it kind of a weird show. But it's lasted longer than a lot of the kid sitcoms from that era. Because a lot of the other kid sitcoms were much more like, let's make fun of our teachers and get in trouble. And it was just sort of like making a joke out of being a kid. And Boy Meets World didn't. And I don't know. That's my theory, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it also had to do with Corey and Topanga.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to watch the show and then meet the love of their life when they were 5, which just happens all the time. No,
crazy.
It never happens. So I think people like that. It was that idealist, kind of young love
dream,
which people liked. But I also think, like anything that lasts, it comes down to the writing a lot when it comes to television shows or movies that people want to continue to watch and that still hold up. And I think a lot of it has to do with the writing and the stories, and they get absurd at times. When you find yourself in a couch. Or like and
a lobster
outfit, but then you'd be like an alcoholic for an episode.
2 episodes.
2 episodes.
Joined a cult for one episode.
You joined a cult at one point, so we never knew what we were kind of walking into, where it was like, oh, Shawn's an alcoholic for 6 pages.
What was the craziest thing for you? Like the craziest Eric moment as far as an outfit or a thing you had to do?
Plays with Squirrels was pretty...
That was so good.
Pretty crazy. There's Plays with Squirrels right there holding up The Secret of Life. Yes. Plays with Squirrels was pretty crazy.
The most out there?
No, the most out there, I think, is the episode where where Eric is stalking Topanga. So he's like he's in the trunk of the tree, and then he's in the couch at the end, and it was weird. But they always had we always called it the 2 Boy Meets World because there was one show where it was Ryder and Ben and Danielle and Trina, and then it was kind of myself and Matt Lawrence and Maitland, and we all did. It was like you guys had this dramatic kind of and then it was like cutting to us to do the wacky stuff.
Yep.
And I always tell people when there was an episode that was about Eric, that was the week that Ben Savage had his finals. So it was like, hey, Ben's taking his SATs. I get a show. So it was, it was certainly interesting. But that was the weirdest thing. You were an alcoholic. I was a couch. That's what they did.
Yeah. I'll speak for Bill a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just think that, what? No, it is amazing to Bill and me that so many people think of Mr. Feeny as a role model, as a grandfather, really, as a man who they still want his advice, and they want him to give the advice that he gave to people on the show. And so many years later, it just appalls Bill. He really doesn't understand it. But he does it, and he does a lot of cameos for people, and people want advice. They want Mr. Feeny's advice. So he repeats many of the things that he did on the show. And it's great, and it's at his age, he's so happy to have it. So happy to have it. Right?
Right.
So speak.
What?
So you say that.
Did I say what?
Say that.
Say what?
Say something.
Say something?
Say something.
I'm at a loss for words.
They met when they were 5 years old
In a sandbox.
in a sandbox.
Well, since we love to praise Mr. Feeny because he's an amazing actor, character, and you guys basically, you grew up with him on the series, so can you talk a bit about the experience you had working with him and throughout the seasons, and just kind of how maybe your bond grew with him on the screen and off the screen, and how that made the series itself just a stronger...
Well, for the first 3 seasons, we thought he was British. That is not a joke.
Nope.
We honestly thought he was British. He wasn't. But it was one of those things where we all... I know now as an adult actor, I thank God that we got to kind of grow up around Bill as actors, because he's is a consummate professional. He was never late, never dropped a line. He always knew his parts. So it kind of taught us how to be professional actors. He never treated us like we were kids. We were co-stars. So it didn't matter that you were 11, 12, 13 years old. You had a job to do. You had work. And it was a wonderful way to learn how to become a professional actor. I mean, at least for me.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know who Bill was when we started, and our executive producer's name was Michael. And so during one of the note sessions, I heard Bill say, "Now, Michael," and I was like, "That's your KITT. You were KITT." That's all I cared about.
Yeah.
No, he, Bill, when you're on a sitcom, they rewrite the script every night. And so we would never memorize our lines until the very last minute. But Bill would show up 3 hours early every day, completely memorized every day. He was just a consummate professional and such a great role model for us. And we were kids. We were goofing off. But because of Michael and Bill, there was a real air of like professionalism on our set that I don't think a lot of other kids shows had.
I would agree.
It was a kind of crazy, and there was also a real emphasis within the show on education and schooling. And that also bled into the set, We had amazing studio teachers. They gave a lot of, Will made the joke, but it was actually part of this. When Ben had finals, he got the week off because it was really important that he did well in school. And the show, when I graduated high school, I went to the producers because I wanted to go to college, and they gave me every morning off to go take classes at Occidental here in LA while still working on the show. They worked the whole schedule around allowing me to go to college, which they didn't have to do. I was under a 6-year contract on Boy Meets World. They didn't have to do that, but they were accommodating our education, and it was a really, really great environment.
I agree.
Yeah.
So you say something. You say something.
What?
You say something.
You want me to say something?
Sure.
it's amazing to see how grown up they've become. Because when we did the show, they were really young teenagers. And I've got to say, they were very well behaved. And I would stay in my dressing room because they fooled around a lot. And until they got serious, then I'd come out and we'd do a scene for the show. And then I'd go back into my dressing room.
That's true. I think a lot of my fondest memories of the show were scenes that Eric and Mr. Feeny had together. Because they weren't supposed to be together. It was supposed to be Corey and Mr. Feeny together. So the idea of Eric and Mr. Feeny together was so absurd that it could never work. And then you put them together, and for some reason it just did, weirdly.
So it was the ultimate straight man.
Yeah,
you know?
it was just, yeah.
I mean, you would just be doing these insane things, and Bill would never break a smile.
I don't think I cracked him one time. Not one time do I think I got him to laugh. But it was, but again, it's not to say he was stern on the set, because he wasn't. He was a joy to work with. But it was different generations working together. And we certainly had them. And that was the thing that was interesting about the show, is it really was generational, because we had everybody from, Bill to Rusty and Betsy, who played our parents, to then kind of teachers that were a little younger than that, to then us, to then Lily Nixon. I mean, we went the 14 little sisters we had. They just kept changing every week. It's like, what's your name? Hi. Okay, great. I'm kidding. We had 2 and they were wonderful. But we kind of hit every generation, which I thought was kind of cool. So maybe that's why it still resonates, because a lot of the fans that are now watching the show are like under the age of 15, which is really cool.
Girl Meets World fans.
And Girl Meets World fans, yeah, that go back to watch Boy Meets World. That didn't know that there was a show beforehand, yeah.
No.
But as you were saying, between even Girl Meets World and the original Boy Meets World series, watching the episodes now, you see a lot of the themes and issues that people deal with today, even if the show is from the 90s. So are there any particular or memorable episodes or scenes that kind of you would believe still would resonate with people today, like topics like when you were talking about the cult episode, and I think you've touched on a lot of different issues that maybe kids growing up were dealing with that maybe they couldn't even talk to their parents about. So Are there any episodes or moments that stick out in your mind that you're like, oh, even if it was then or now, that audiences could connect with or learn from?
I mean, I think, it's hard to pinpoint. Shawn went through so much drama. It's hard to pinpoint. But I think in general, the idea that if you come from a family that's broken or not supportive in some way, like Shawn did, and that you could have a chosen family, or that you could find a friendship that in a way can sort of replace your parents. That was a relatively new idea when we were doing it. Now I feel like that's a little more of a common understanding. But when we were doing it, I really think that that's an important message. And I really appreciate that. And the sort of bigger message of Boy Meets World overall is that your childhood is important, and that your friends and your boyfriend or your girlfriend and your teacher, like, these people are not frivolous. That those experiences you have and those relationships that you forge, and those things will carry through the rest of your life, whether you want them to or not. So you might as well make them good, and you might as well take them seriously. And I don't think a lot of shows in the 80s were doing that. That was a relatively new concept, and now I think that that's more of a given. And I think that that's another reason the show's resonated. So I don't know, that's a kind of, I'm sorry to evade, I don't have a particular episode or a particular moment. I mean, but yeah, like, I think that overall idea of like, hey, take your friends seriously, take your relationships with your teachers and all those people seriously, because it's going to matter. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing how people accepted without a question going from year to year to year to year to year, and Bill was always the teacher.
That's normal, isn't it?
Junior high school, college.
Yeah, of course.
He was a stalker.
He was always there. He was their teacher, and people just accepted that without question.
Yeah.
And they liked it, and that's it. So yeah.
Well, my teacher from nursery school all the way through college is also my neighbor. Isn't that how it
Totally normal.
works? It's completely normal. But speaking of school, I mean, the episode that always stuck out for me that I got a lot of letters about was when Eric decided to do what he could to get into college. And then he didn't get in and had to work harder to get in. So I had a lot of people that wrote me kind of saying, I wasn't going to go to college, I didn't think I could get into college. And then I saw that Eric went and I worked harder and I got into college. So I thought that was one that was really cool. And adopting Tommy, that's just a personal thing for me, was an interesting episode. Not that, Eric at 19 should have been saddled with a child, but those were important episodes for us.
Ask my support.
Yeah, I'm trying to get him to say something about the teachers. All the teachers that ask you for support.
I can't say anything.
You can't say that? Oh, I can. He gets an awful lot of requests from people who say they became teachers because of Mr. Feeny. And
That's amazing.
Yeah.
so he hears from teachers every day. Somebody who's a teacher. I became a teacher because of you, or I got interested in history because of you and John Adams in 1776. It's, he has a way of influencing people. He really does.
That's for sure.
I think one of the most memorable moments in the show, oddly enough, was the finale episode. I think that was the most emotional and one of the most touching moments. Can you tell us about working on the finale and going back and filming and just how that was, kind of wrapping up such an amazing series then in that way?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was real life at that point. I mean, that final scene where we're saying goodbye to Bill there was no distinction from Shawn and Ryder at that point. I'd already, I was transferring to go to college in New York, just like the characters were going to New York to go to college. And we were saying goodbye to 7 years of friendship and working together. Terrified about what the future would bring, and also kind of happy to be moving on and excited to be moving on. All those emotions. It was a real, it was a lot. And so we did one take of that scene in the classroom saying goodbye to Bill, and I just bawled like a baby, and that was all real. And it was both awful and wonderful at the same time. And when we did the one take, we were, gonna go do another take, and the directors were like, "No, we're not gonna put these kids through this anymore." So yeah, it's pretty raw.
I saw it when it aired, and that's the last time I saw it. I haven't watched it since. I don't think I could. So it was I imagine shows like Friends or Seinfeld or things like that, when you start as adults and end as adults, that's one thing. And you still get the bond of working together, and you still get the bond of friendship. But when you start as kids and you grow up together, and you've got this mentor who's with you the entire time, saying goodbye there takes on an entirely different tone. And it was hard for all of us, for all of our different reasons. I mean, we were all different ages. I think I was 24 at the time, 23, and I was the old guy, So it was like, as Ryder said, you're ready to move on, but you also don't want to move on. It's that feeling of, I can't wait to go to college and get out of my house, but I don't want to leave the house. It's that kind of struggle. So, that was real for all of us. And if you go back and you watch the scene, there's mistakes all over the place. I mean, mistakes all the time, and we couldn't shoot it again. So they just went, let's just air it. That's
Bill,
fine.
Would you comment about the last scene, please?
Okay. Mr. Feeny was a kind of a strict kind of guy, and demanded that they behave and do their work. But the last show we did, they all left the room, and I said to the empty room, "I love you all." And that's one of my favorite moments in the play, in the show. Yep.
How did you feel?
So after this long period of time since the show began, and just the way that all of these people are here now celebrating it, did you ever think that it would become practically a phenomenon? Did you ever think that it would grasp so many people the way that it did when you originally started? And are you just very thankful and grateful that people have connected with a project that you worked on and cared about so much?
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy to think about is, even as kids, I think Will and I already had been burned enough by Hollywood. I mean, but really, by the time I was 13, I had already done like 3 different TV series that had gotten canceled after the pilot.
Totally jaded.
Yeah, so I was like, what is this new script? It was called the Ben Savage Project.
The Untitled Ben Savage
They
Project.
were building it around Ben. And I remember reading the pilot script and being like, on the character of Shawn, I only have 2 lines. Okay. Never thought it would mean anything. We shot the pilot. Even when we did the pilot, I remember having fun, but thinking, well, this show will never get picked up, which is, just crazy. But you lose perspective. You don't know. As an actor, you just kind of go from project to project, from pilot season to pilot season, and it really wasn't until Topanga was introduced, which is the episode Corey's Alternative Friends. That was when it felt like something special happened, and I think we all realized it. It was like, and what had happened is they had kept trying to find a third best friend. They wanted Corey to have 2 best friends. And so we always had another kid sitting in the chair in the cafeteria, and we started calling it the death chair because they would never be back the next week. And finally, one episode, they fired the kid halfway through the week and gave me all of his lines. And that was the Corey's Alternative Friends episode, and that also introduced Danielle. And she was supposed to only be in the 1 episode. But, something magical happened. The show came together. And I think part of it was because the show originally was supposed to more be about the family, and school was kind of going to be secondary. The original pitch for Boy Meets World was Growing Pains was on the air, and Michael Jacobs said, why don't we do a show that's about the middle brother as opposed to the older brother, because all the TV shows at the time were always focusing on the older kid. So the whole pitch was to be about what it's like to be the middle brother in your family, and also what if your teacher lives next door. So school was kind of just going to be a part of, a sideline. And at that moment, the 5th episode, when we were filming it, I think everybody realized, actually, school might be a really big part of the show. And the relationships that Corey has with his friends and his potential girlfriend, and all of that is going to become if not more important than the family storyline. And so that was really when I think I realized, this could be a thing. And the audience went crazy that night. Yeah. And we just all felt it. We all felt the vibe on set. And then, of course, that ended up being the first episode that we got a 24 share, which means nothing to anybody now. But back then was a big deal because we used to do these things called Nielsen ratings, which would tell us how many people are watching the show. And, now it means nothing. But back then, that was a big deal. It meant that our show was going to continue. And it was that episode that got our first 24 share. So, then we knew we were in it forever. And I remember talking to my 13-year-old girlfriend at the time back home, because I didn't live in Los Angeles. I would come down to work. And I remember being like, oh my God, can you imagine if this show goes? I could be 20 when this is over. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. It's crazy.
Well, I think we're actually a little bit out of time, but I loved hearing from you guys talking about the series. We all love Boy Meets World, and I'm so
everybody.
happy that you all came to talk with us about this amazing series. So thank you so much to writers Shawn and Will Friedle and William Daniels and Bonnie Bartlett for sitting and talking with us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys so much.
And thank you
Have fun at the
all
con.
for coming to the panel.
This is John Glover, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Lionel Luther recommends it. Have some fun. Follow your fandom.